Tonight on Let It Rip.
Chill out.
This viral video, just the latest episode of Rage in the Air. People freaking out on planes and in airports. Meantime, cases of road rage here at home and across the country skyrocketing, many turning deadly. So what's behind the alarming trend? But first,
if you want to participate in our society fully, you got to get vaccinated.
as the fight against vaccine hesitancy continues, many schools and businesses are making it mandatory. In New York, you'll soon have to get the shot to eat at a restaurant. Is this the right approach, or will it just lead to protests and lawsuits? Time now to Let It Rip. On the panel tonight, retired soldier and current businessman and chair of the Oakland County Republican Party, Rocky Rakchowski, Democratic consultant and public relations guru, Greg Bowens, and Reverend Steve Bland, pastor of Liberty Temple Baptist Church, who's joining other Baptist pastors in a new effort to combat the hesitancy we're finding with the COVID vaccine. But we'll begin with Dr. Michael Basuito, who's a reconstructive surgeon and member of the Wayne State Board of Governors. Dr. Basuito, it's good to see you. Your university just announced this week they're mandating COVID vaccines for all students, staff, and faculty. What are your thoughts on that? Do you support that?
Full disclosure, I'm vaccinated. All 6 of my children are vaccinated. I'm a strong proponent and believer in the vaccine. However, I'm not a proponent of mandating it. Now, this was something that's in the purview of the administration and the president. Our president's a physician. He has an epidemiology background, and I'm sure he has a good reason for putting out the statement. It was passed on to the board before he sent it out. It didn't go to a vote because it didn't have to. And I disagree with it, but it doesn't mean he's right and I'm wrong, vice versa.
Bottom line right now, we have a situation that is just now beginning where we're going to see organizations that literally have zero obligation to ask, zero obligation to check with, and zero obligation to make sure it's okay with the people who work within a company, an organization, or even a restaurant. If you want to go into a restaurant, they have every right to say no shirt, no service, no shot, then you're not going to get in. So Charlie Langton, I bring you into the fold to ask you the question, what are we going to see here in terms of the legal floodgates opening up when people can say, look, I didn't want to get the vaccine and you're making me?
I think people don't have to get the vaccine. Right now, there's no mandate to get the vaccine. However, you may not be able to go to your favorite restaurant, your favorite school, your favorite movie, your favorite airplane, your favorite country, perhaps. So you don't have to get the vaccine. I'm not aware of any proposal in this administration that would mandate vaccines. It's encouraged, and the ramifications of not getting it are well known. But at this point in time, the government is not going to mandate, as I understand it. Now, private companies, totally different. Fox 2, if they wanted to, they could say, and totally legal, get the vaccine. You may have a religious objection or perhaps a medical exception. But other than that, if a private company wants to say get the vaccine, as I understand the law, it is totally legal right now.
And while no one is saying that you have to, nor is there a mandate from the government, I guess what I'm trying to say here is exactly what you pointed to, which is, look, you're going to make it really tough for me to go anywhere without getting the vaccine. We know in New York right now what they are talking about is having a vaccine passport to essentially get into restaurants, athletic clubs, what you name it, a fitness place. You won't be able to unless you have that passport. That's how that proposal looks. Greg Bowens, something like that could be creeping up, you think, here in Metro Detroit?
I think it could be, and it should be. The big three is already mandating that everybody that works for them has to wear a mask. You know, I'm sorry, Dr. B, but as an alumni of Wayne State University, I'm very disappointed in your position. I think that you're betraying your Hippocratic oath here to do no harm by saying that everybody shouldn't have to get a vaccine. The reality is, and as you well know, that 99% of the people who are hospitalized and dying of the Delta variant are because they're not vaccinated. And so Wayne State is fulfilling an obligation as a public university inside of a city that only has less than a 40% vaccination rate to make sure that the people that come on their campus are getting vaccinated. So I can appreciate you saying, you know, hey, it was the president's decision and my kids are vaccinated and I'm vaccinated. But you know what? There are a bunch of poor people who don't have the kind of access to medical facilities that you do should you get sick, even though you are vaccinated. And you're giving them less of an opportunity to survive, and I really don't appreciate that. I think you should rethink your position, my friend.
Let's let him explain his position a bit here, Greg. Dr. B, why is it that you feel that is something that isn't good to actually tell people who come on the campus, who are students and faculty, hey, you have to be vaccinated to keep other people safe?
It's still under emergency use authorization. I got to tell you, for the last week, I've been taking informal polls through the hospitals, and the people who oppose this the most are the 20 and 30-year-old nurses in the ICUs who have been taking care of these COVID patients. And they're saying, we've been through 3 surges, we've risked our lives, we've risked our family lives. And if another surge comes, we'll take care of them again. But you're not going to force me to put something in my body I don't want to put in my body. And these people who are not getting vaccinated, to my knowledge so far, it's their choice. And if they choose to not get vaccinated, who are we to force them? This is not Cuba. This is not North Korea. This is America. People should have a choice.
Dr. B, I'm sorry, Dr. B. The very hospitals that you're talking about, they require people to not smoke. And they test people that if you smoke cigarettes, you cannot work here. So you mean to tell me that somehow smoking a cigarette and losing your job if you have nicotine in your body is somehow more offensive than getting a vaccine that could save your life? That's ridiculous what you're talking about.
But Greg, to Dr. B's point, emergency use authorization and in a situation, an episode that's literally been 1 year long, where people, has not been approved by the FDA, but rather for emergency use. So when you take a look at that, smoking over the last 70, 80 years, we've learned the ramifications. We know what happens when you smoke, and we know what happens when you get secondhand smoke.
Very
Rocky,
well
I want to
said,
bring
Rick.
you into the fold. Rocky Rachowski, I want to bring you back into the fold here. And I have this question for you. Do you find it peculiar and interesting that you have 2 very, very distinct groups in this country that many of whom in these groups are not wanting to get the vaccine? Rural white Republicans, and then also Black Americans in the urban core. If they got together in a room, they'd have a lot more in common, especially on this one, than they'd ever believe, wouldn't you say?
I have always said that, actually, and that's why I've always supported the Blexit movement. But first, let me just stand up for my friend Dr. Basuido here, because quite frankly, supporting the Constitution and standing up for his Hippocratic oath are very 2 distinct things. Dr. Basuido is supporting the Constitution because in the Constitution, if I'm not mistaken, Greg, is it not your party that also supports abortion on demand and roots around that statement that says, my body, my choice? In this situation, you actually have your body, your choice. And it's not being mandated, except, by the way, Charlie, it is mandated now for the military, if you're a government contractor, or if you work for the government. This administration went on the line and basically made it mandated on those employees. So I'm a strong believer that individual choice and individual precautions, individual responsibility, and education should be the prime thing that we should be talking about. Not
I want to bring a
someone to
voice
take
in
a
here.
vaccine.
Rocky, I want to bring a voice in here that's been critically important to so many people in the African-American community. I've had the pleasure of spending the last few days covering the efforts of Dr. Reverend Bland, the good Dr. Steve Bland, talking to all the constituents in these Baptist churches, 50 Baptist churches coming together saying, look, there is some information here that people are getting on social media and spreading like wildfire that may be incorrect. Let's get together at the pulpit and chat a little bit about what this vaccine really is. Dr. Bland, I want to give you the chance to chat for a moment about what it is you're finding when people come to church to learn about the vaccine.
First of all, I'm glad to be a part of the conversation. I hope to balance out and bring another Dr. B perspective and take a little heat off of Dr. Basuido. But let me just say, this is not a matter of left and right. It's a matter of what basically is wrong and right in life and death. We are actually looking at and approaching in America about 700,000 deaths, in a year and a half's time. And, as a pastor and a minister, while I don't believe that you can legislate morality or you can mandate salvation in preaching, but the fact is that we ought to be as persuasive as we possibly can be. Because if I was in an airplane that's dealing with turbulence and had no doors, I don't think it's much of a choice if I want to put on a parachute. or if I'm in a boat and I'm dealing with the issue of it potentially going down because of turbulent waters, a life preserver shouldn't have to be mandated. It should be common sense and it should be a choice. And I think we need to message better. I think our messaging is what ought to be persuasive. I'm going to do a funeral this coming Monday of a local basketball star, Tony Tolbert. Was a great person who did the poorest school, Michigan, the gamut, came back to U of D Mercy. And he's one of those persons who basically could take the shot on a basketball court, but refused to take the shot, when it came to the vaccine. And unfortunately, his friends, his family, and others are mourning and grieving. And I've spent quite a bit of time this week dealing with them as well as that and wishing they could have persuaded him to take the shot. And I think that if knowing Tony, had he been here, he'd probably be telling his friends, I was wrong. I need to take the shot. I need you to do that.
Reverend, I want to ask you one more question about this particular effort that you're putting forth, because this is an important distinction. You yourself, Reverend, were hesitant to take the shot. And someone in particular, one doctor, Dr. Corbett, helped move the meter for you. Talk about that and how she is still influencing other people right now throughout the city of Detroit.
Absolutely. Dr. Kismekia Corbett, who was influential with the Moderna vaccination, was able to persuade me as well as many others. And again, as you well stated, we have pastors. I'm as president of Council of Baptist Pastors. I've got several churches open up its doors, and many of us studied this for well over a year and listened. And it was her plea and passion because, when you start talking about medicine and politics, it makes strange babies in the Black community. So when it comes to Tuskegee, when it comes to medical apartheid, when it comes to these kind of things, trust levels aren't very high. But when she said that as a doctor, I can speak, but let me speak as a mother who has 2 children, and I wouldn't put anything in my body that I would be aware that would hurt me and my chances to see my children grow up, get married, graduate, do all these things. And it was that trust message that crossed over the level for me. And I've been vaccinated, my first shot in February, second shot in early March. And again, it's a matter that most of us who have done it are messaging the fact that I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it, because the death we're dealing with now is the death of the unvaccinated. And so again, it's not a message of, is this about my rights, about mandates? No, it's about being able to give a love message of persuasion, because I don't think we ought to be in a heaven and hell mode on this one. I think we ought to be talking to people in a matter of, do you choose to live, and have an opportunity for quality life? Because even if you get it, the chances of you dying or having severe issues is lessened greatly. And that is the thing I think people need to come to see, and the testimonies that go forth will make that. So I choose faith over fear.
Dr. Bland, we're going to continue our conversation with you throughout the coming weeks in the month of August as these church doors are open with vaccine clinics inside of the church. We're going to be there every step of the way. Look, whether or not the government decides to do more of the mandating or less, the bottom line is businesses have a choice and people do as well. What will happen next? This is an unfolding story that, of course, we're going to continue to follow very closely. Another one we're following very closely. I can't begin to
tell you the number of people who say to me and other pastors, it's because I trust your voice, your message, the sanctity of the church and the messenger, that I'm making that choice. And that's the reason why we must get out and do that. And I'm glad to hear that the council
making that choice. Very well said. Making that choice.
Oh, Rocky, you hypocrite. Help me block Jesus.
Hold on. Hold the fire. Hold the fire. We have another one that's coming up next in our next segment on Let It Rip, talking about something that's very, very prevalent on our highways, on our streets, on our planes, air rage, road rage. People need to cool their jets. Is it because of the pandemic pandemonium that people are feeling this fervor that they can't get rid of? We're going to bring in a psychological expert and talk to Rocky, Greg, and the 2 Dr. B's about this when Let It Rip comes back after this. Welcome back to Let It Rip. You've met Rocky, Greg, and our 2 Dr. B's. We want to welcome into the fold clinical psychologist Dr. Carol Van Dyke, because as we've been dealing with this pandemic for a year and a half, we've also seen a rising epidemic of road rage and shootings on our highways, along with numerous instances of people attacking each other on planes, in stores. Can this all be blamed on the pandemic, or is something else going on? Let's join the panel right now and get right into it. And Dr. Van Dyke, I want to begin with you as someone who, of course, studies human nature and why it is we do what we do and act the way we act. Is the pandemic pandemonium the excuse for this type of an uptick in violence on the streets?
It's an excuse, but I definitely think it's an explanation. I think a lot of people are dealing with the post-pandemic stressors. There are people who have been isolated from their homes within a year, over a year and a half. We have mask mandates. We have political polarization. We have people who are still experiencing the loss and grief of loved ones and experiencing financial problems. And I think when you put all of those combinations together, I think you do experience feelings of tension, frustration, and that frustration turning into anger. So I do think there's an explanation there.
Well, let me ask you this. So my wife is a mental health therapist, and she often says there's nothing wrong with being angry. In fact, we live in a society that's addicted to Monday motivations and always feeling the good and not understanding that sadness, anger, fear they're all a part of life. How we deal with that and whether we transform or transmit it is critically important. Rocky, when you look at what's happening on the streets, you've served our country in the military. You've seen people fight because they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. And here you are, people are fighting because they felt like they weren't being respected on the roads. It has to start disgusting you at some level.
It really does. And, you know, we're coming up to the 20th anniversary or commemoration of September 11th. And the day that I like to remember is September 12th, where there were no Democrats or Republicans. Our nation was united. We had a common enemy, and it brought our country together. Now, I would never want our country to be attacked again, but I'm going to go on a limb here and actually invoke the good Reverend Doctor here and say that in my personal opinion, I think that it's a lack of God, a lack of belonging, and a lack of seeing that our country, that there's something higher to aspire to. It's a lack of personal discipline, and that we as a country have lost so much in some respects in disciplining our children, teaching them respect for others. And we walk around angry, and we think that it's something that, you know, it's, by the way, anger is, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Van Dyke, one of the most common emotions. But we walk around angry thinking that it's everybody else's fault, instead of smiling and realizing what a great country we really have and how much unites us and not divides us.
And Rocky, I want to talk to Dr. Van Dyke in just a moment about some solutions here, but I want to ask Reverend Bland, as you invoked, of course, his name into this conversation, to talk a little bit about why this is different than something like 9/11. I think it's safe to say we were all pretty darn angry after 9/11 about a loss of control, about what happened to us as a nation and as people. Why didn't the pandemic do the same thing to us? And why are people acting out differently this time?
Well, I think you have both internal and external stimuli and stressors that have to be considered. And I agree with what Dr. Van Dyke said. And when all of those things come together, it becomes a perfect storm and almost a Molotov cocktail that explodes in our community in regards to that. And when you add that to the stressors that already exist on an everyday basis with Black and brown people in communities, and you have people who have been not only closed into homes and things of that nature and trying to figure out the unknown and the fear. And because we are a nation that talks about one nation under God, but we do not acknowledge God as we once did, I think at some point now you have people who turn to fear quicker than they turn to faith. It does not help when you're looking on these television screens and people who you should trust and honor to lead you through this are fighting sometimes like 2-year-olds. Most of our conversations with political leaders and others tend to come across as people who give more heat than light to the discussion. People are looking for a way through the darkness. And when you get to a place where people are sick and dying and you can't go to the hospital to say goodbye, you cannot be able to go to the funeral, you have the capacity to not have the ability to grieve as you normally do, and you don't know where your next meal might come from or whether or not you'll live to see another day or if you can breathe air and contract something, these things heighten. And again, they began to explode in unusual and unpredictable ways. So I think that we must begin to start giving messages and messaging among leadership responsibly. They give light out of the darkness and not heat that increases the problem.
Amen.
Charlie Langton, you're on the roads from 4 o'clock in the morning, essentially at working the radio job until the night. You're literally out on the streets at every single hour. What have you noticed in terms of the temperature on the road? And Do you agree with what Reverend Bland says there about people kind of losing their own faith in humanity, each other, and God?
I think that the problem we have is that people are not communicating effectively with people. And I think that a lot of it is because we can text, we can Instagram, we can message, but we don't talk to people, pick up the phone, or see them in person. And I think we have a difficulty sometimes of understanding people. And I think if we could just talk to people, we could probably solve a lot of differences. Whether even if it's on the road, maybe we could understand something. If somebody cuts us off, you know what? If you do and you recognize it, say, sorry, I made a mistake, okay, and move on. That would do quite a bit, but that's not the case. And I think that we really do have to understand people better. And I think if we could come together, I mean, it shows like this, in a way, we can disagree on issues, but at the end, I think we all have a respect for each other. And I think that's what's missing a lot. If we had that, I think a lot of problems could be solved.
Dr.
Charlie,
Van Dyke, when does this fear and this sadness turn into anger? And how do we interrupt and disrupt that cycle?
First of all, I think a lot of people tend to avoid and suppress their emotions. And when you avoid and suppress emotions, as opposed to being able to identify your triggers, which are people, places, things that might set you off, you can then begin to come up with a plan of action and to determine how you want to behave. I think one of the things that Charlie mentioned is, people don't want to really be accountable anymore for their actions. They don't want to communicate. And I think that once you have an understanding of really what's going on inside of you and what is breeding that anger, frustration, and tension, and be able to identify what it is, you can make a choice to do something about it. And that's what people are not doing.
Rocky, Greg Bowens, the two Dr. B's, we want to hear your final thoughts on this topic and more in a moment. But we should also tell you, when we come back here on Let It Rip, our Charlie Langton took these questions to the road when Let It Rip hit the road. We'll have that when we come back.
Been a lot of road rage lately.
Oh my gosh. It's been terrible. I don't do road rage. I just let them do what they want.
People are just angry these days. I have no idea.
They don't want to follow the rules.
I've beat my horn at this lady on John R. before, and she completely stopped in the road, blocked me.
Suppose somebody cut you off right now, just like that. What would you do?
I'd be going, hey! That's about it, because if you say any more, you might get hurt.
You're driving along, you got to get somewhere, someone just cuts you right off. What do you do to them?
Probably curse in my head, say a couple words out here and there.
I don't like people that are in the left lane and decide they want to get off at this exit ramp and they cut everybody off to get over there instead of just going to the next exit. And I drive with him a lot and it pisses me off.
What do you say? Just let it go.
Yeah. My mother's gonna hear this, so I can't. I gotta go home and kiss my mom with the same tongue.
Final thoughts. Let's get right to Dr. Basuido. How do we control ourselves, Doc?
Well, I want to reinforce what Charlie Langton said in that people don't communicate anymore. And they say this new generation is the most connected generation. It's the most disconnected generation, in my opinion. I think we need to put the cell phones down, look at each other in the eyes, talk to each other, and communicate. And I support
Greg
Charlie's
Bowens.
opinion.
What are your thoughts? What do we do?
I'm going to tell you what I tell my kids and how I raise them, which is the ABCs. Always be cool. The first thing you want to do is inhale love, exhale peace. Keep doing that until you're feeling loving and peaceful, particularly in stressful situations.
Reverend Bland, what would you say?
We're not divided. We're disconnected. We need to breathe. We need to step back. We need to believe. And we need to know that, again, we don't need to turn on each other. We need to turn to each other. It's time to connect.
We connect with Rocky with his thoughts. Rocky.
I agree with the fine Reverend Doctor. I completely agree. But I'll also say that in the military, it's easy to shoot on an enemy that's dehumanized and that you don't have a connection with. We all need to start respecting each other and treating each other as equals.
Charlie Langton.
I agree with Rocky. I agree with everyone that said this thing. I think we have to be nice, but I think we also have to understand people. And I think we have to understand the difference of opinion. And once we understand the difference of opinion, we'll be better off.
Yeah. Dr. Van Dyke, we have about 10 seconds left.
Oh gosh, I think a person should, before they decide to come out of the house, I think it's important that they examine their behavior and conduct and be able to identify what their triggers are. And then they can make a plan to do something different about it.
Civility is what separates us from animals. Let's try to exercise it. That does it for this edition of Let It Rip. We thank you all for joining us tonight. Have a great night, everyone.